An English school teacher finds a computer that writes messages from the 1500s claiming contact with a man from 2109. A British Royal Air Force officer flies over an abandoned airfield in 1935 and sees it fully operational decades before it should exist. And a man warns of a future collapse in what he calls secret time authorities, claiming he's already lived centuries ahead of us. These are more people who claimed they were from the future. I cannot believe I've been doing videos on this channel as long as I have, and have not come across this first story until today. This is the tale of the Dodleston Messages. In 1984, in a small English village called Dodleston, a teacher named Ken Webster was fixing up a dusty old cottage with his girlfriend Debbie and their long-term guest Nicola. While working, they noticed something odd. There were 6-toed footprints. None of these people had 6 toes, in case that needed clarifying. And then more and more weird stuff kept happening at the cottage. They'd find icy cold spots. They'd see strange shadows everywhere. Your typical paranormal type activity. Ken also had a BBC microcomputer, an early 80s home computer that wasn't even connected to the internet or any network. But one day, a message popped up on the screen. It was a poem, creepy and cryptic, talking about nightmares and decaying flowers. Over time, Ken realized they were supposedly coming from someone who lived in the same cottage, but in the 1500s. LW, he said his name was. And then he revealed his true name to be Thomas Hardin, claiming he was being accused of witchcraft in his time and had lost his land. Thomas was just as confused as Ken was. He said he'd been communicating through a strange box of lights that appeared in his home, which he believed was some kind of magic. That box was likely referring to Ken's computer, meaning both men were somehow using the same object to send messages across centuries. And then things got even stranger. Another mysterious person started sending messages too, supposedly from the year 2109. This future group claimed they were monitoring both Ken and Thomas as part of an experiment to study how time interacts. Back in 1935, a British Royal Air Force officer named Victor Goddard was flying a biplane over an old abandoned airfield near Edinburgh. The place was basically falling apart. Overgrown, crumbling buildings, there were no planes, no people. A few days later, he flew the same route again. As he got close to the airfield, a sudden storm kicked up. Just as quickly as it started though, the sky cleared. And what he saw made zero sense. The airfield wasn't abandoned anymore. Buildings had been fixed up, freshly painted as well. Planes were sitting on the tarmac, painted bright yellow, which wasn't even a color the Air Force was using yet. Mechanics were in blue overalls, moving around, working on the planes. Goddard was shaken, but he reported what he saw. Most people thought he'd misremembered or gotten confused, but then World War II rolled around. And wouldn't you know it, that same airfield was rebuilt exactly as he'd seen it years before. There were yellow planes, blue overalled mechanics, everything lined up perfectly. Goddard wasn't some conspiracy theorist either. He rose to Air Marshal, one of the top brass in the Royal Air Force, and he stuck to his story till the day he died. Dzia Vertov, or just Vertov, claims he's one of the first time travelers ever caught on camera. Back in 2014, he gave a YouTube interview where he shared all this stuff about the future. He said there's a kind of authority that controls both time travelers and regular people, making sure nobody messes with history. According to him, they can erase memories or trap someone in what he calls a perpetual cell, while a clone takes their place. So Vertov said he took a huge risk just doing this interview, warning that future generations are facing a major collapse. Society will fall apart, money will vanish, but that eventually humans will rebuild. The interviewer was, understandably, pretty skeptical, especially since Vertov refused to show any proof. He didn't take the doubt well and walked off the set, possibly even walked off this plane of time, never to return. Paul Amadeus Dienach was a Swiss teacher who in 1921 fell into a coma thanks to some serious health issues. When he woke up, he claimed to have lived an entire year, but not in his own time. Dienach said he had woken up in the year 3906, inhabiting the life of a man named Andreas Nora. At first, he couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. Towering skyscrapers, flying cars. He also described using a glowing device which let him access all the world's knowledge. Sounds a lot like a smartphone. During this year, Dienach documented everything he saw. He described humanity struggling through overpopulation, environmental disasters, and wars. For for the first few centuries of the second millennium. He wrote about attempts to colonize Mars, which ultimately failed, and then a catastrophic nuclear war in 2309 that forced humanity to rethink its way of living. From that chaos, though, a global government rose to power, eventually leading to a golden age around the year 3400. Before he died, he handed his diaries to a former student who translated them and found extremely specific details about the language, the technology, and the structure of that society. The world building was on point. Obviously, this could have been an elaborate dream, but his notes are still considered by some to be one of the most compelling cases of possible time travel. Alright, this one's pretty silly. I never said these had to be convincing. I just said these were people who claim to be from the future, alright? In 2018, a guy named Alexander Smith popped up in a few videos on Apex TV, YouTube, claiming he was a time traveler. According to him, the CIA sent him back in 1981 on a secret mission to the year 2118. He never really explained what the mission was, but apparently when he came back, the agency was not thrilled. Smith said he had to go into hiding because the CIA has supposedly been hunting him ever since. As for evidence, he just brought along a blurry photo of a futuristic city, which he claims he took in 2118. He says it's blurry because of the effects of time travel, which kind of sounds like a writer doing a shoddy patch job in a plot hole. Smith also said he'd been holding on to it since the 80s because the world just wasn't ready to see it yet. But by 2018, he apparently decided it was finally time. The guy also talks in this constantly wavering Americanish accent. It's kind of strange. I guess it's meant to be a future voice, kind of an amalgamation of different accents, maybe. Back in 2006, a Swedish guy named Håkan Nordkvist came forward with a very strange story. He said he was fixing a leak under his sink when suddenly the sink moved away on its own. Before he knew it, a blinding white light had surrounded him, and the next thing he knew, he was outside, staring at an older version of himself. Instead of freaking out, the two Håkans had a friendly chat, and Håkan even recorded the conversation on his phone. One of the big standouts of the video was their matching tattoos. Now, the footage of the older Håkan's face was blurry, and the tattoos looked way too fresh to belong to someone supposedly decades older. On top of that, there was no explanation for how he got back to his own time. But eventually, it came out the whole thing was actually a publicity stunt. Håkan's story was part of a marketing campaign for the Swedish insurance company AMF, promoting their pension plans using the theme of time travel. In 2017, a mysterious man known only as Noah showed up online claiming he was a time traveler from 2030. What stood out to many people was that he'd apparently passed a lie detector test. Noah said he'd traveled multiple times in the past but was stuck in the present. Noah gave a detailed, if bizarre, description of how he time traveled. He'd step into a giant dome with electronic devices all over his body, which supposedly pushed him through time while feeling like he was being electrocuted. He also took anti-aging pills to stay the same age while hopping around, claiming he was actually 50 but looks 25 thanks to these pills. And of course, Noah also dropped a long list of predictions for the future. He said humans would reach Mars in 2028, time travel would be discovered, Bitcoin would grow in popularity, electric cars would match petrol ones in speed, and multiple forms of cancer would be cured. He claimed contact with aliens, said that Instagram would die out, and that Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter would become US president. Noah eventually admitted it was all fake. Noah, whose face had always been blurred out, finally showed his face and said his real name was Jason. He said he was being bullied at school, was struggling with his identity, and didn't have any friends. Became obsessed with YouTube and started emailing Apex TV pretending to be a time traveler. One of his videos got posted, and then overnight he became internet famous. Jason admitted it quickly turned into an addiction for him. Even the lie detector test he passed was just a mix of him believing his own story, being medicated to stay calm, and that the test itself was kind of low quality. Just goes to show how, lie detector tests, not always the most reliable. Jason ended his video by admitting he's not a great actor, but people still believed him, urging viewers to keep an open mind. Back in 2017, Wyoming cops had a pretty unusual call. A man named Bryant was wandering the streets completely intoxicated, insisting he was a time traveler from 2048. He said he'd traveled back to warn everyone about an alien invasion set to hit in 2018. He then demanded to speak directly with the, quote, president of the town to personally deliver his warning. I can't fathom why, but the cops did not take him seriously. Instead of preparing for this alien apocalypse, Bryant was arrested and slapped with a public intoxication charge. Back in 1932, two German reporters, J. Bernard Hutton and Joachim Brandt, were visiting the Hamburg-Altona shipyards. Everything seemed normal until suddenly bombs started raining down around them. They rushed into a vehicle and managed to escape terrified. As chaotic as the situation was, though, they did manage to snap some photos. But when the film was developed, the images were just blank. They told their editor about what had happened, but he just brushed them off. After all, they had no proof. In 1943, though, Hutton was flipping through a newspaper and his jaw hit the floor. The Royal Air Force had carried out an air raid on that same shipyard from 11 years before, and the destruction matched exactly what he and Brandt described all those years earlier. Back in 1901, two British academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, were visiting Versailles for some sightseeing, but things got weird. They claimed that while wandering the palace grounds, they suddenly found themselves somewhere entirely different, like they'd slipped back in time to the late 18th century. They said they saw people, including members of Louis XVI's court and Marie Antoinette herself. They also said they walked through gardens that didn't match the maps they had, and that there were people in period clothing going about their daily routines. They were so convinced of what they'd seen that they later wrote a book about it called An Adventure, using pseudonyms to avoid being publicly humiliated for how strange it all sounded. And this is one of the earliest recorded stories of what people now call a time slip, where reality seems to fold back on itself. All that said, though, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, somewhere in the future.